We need to get started. We're on Genesis chapter 33. And I think this is a very short chapter, but I kind of wanted to show you guys something that I think you're going to find very interesting. Last week, we talked, our week before, well, whenever it was. Last time we met, we were at Genesis chapter 32, and we talked about how Jacob split up the camp into two camps, and he wrestled with God, and then, of course, God calls him Israel. And now we're going to move into where Esau is coming up the road. He just finished wrestling with God. God is blessing, and God changed his name to Israel. And so now we move into Genesis chapter 33. And verse 1 says, now, you have to remember, he's been up all night long. He sees the sun coming up, and here's what he sees. Now Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and there Esau was coming, and with him were 400 men. And this is why he had split up the camp. He was afraid that his brother was going to beat him up, kill everybody, and he thought if he comes up on the one camp, the other camp can escape. So he split up into two camps, and he sees his brother coming with 400 men. And he just wrestled with God, and God said, I'm going to bless you. Your name's going to be Israel. I'm going to do all these things for you. But Jacob's still kind of he's a deceitful kind of a guy and a fearful kind of a guy. But you know what? He's got the blessing of God because he's a descendant of Abraham. So deceitful. Huh?
He was a deceitful.
He's a deceiver. That's what his name means. He would say things, and you're going to see in this chapter, he tells his brother one thing and then does another, and he was always doing that. But it came back on him. That's why he got stuck with Leah, because karma comes around, I guess. So he had to work another 7 years for the one that he really wanted.
Comes around.
But anyways, he lifts up his eyes, and there Esau was coming, and with him 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two maidservants. So you remember, he married Leah first, then he married Rachel, and he had children with Leah. Rachel wasn't bearing children, so Rachel gave Jacob her servant to bear children for her. And then when Leah saw Rachel give her servant, Leah gave her servant to Jacob. So Jacob had basically 4 wives. 2 legitimate and 2 maidservants, concubines, or they were his wives. But he put the maidservants and their children in front. So now you can see he's kind of got some favorites here. Like Shelley probably likes Josie the best out of all the kids. I think her favorite's Josie. But anyways, he put the maidservants and their children in front, and then Leah and her children behind them. So what he does is he creates 3 different camps. The maidservants and their children, then Leah and her children, and Rachel and Joseph last. Okay? Joseph is Rachel's boy that she finally had. God heard her prayers, and Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. And you remember, we're going to see how he makes the coat of many colors, and his brothers are always jealous of him. So Jacob takes his family and splits them up. Okay, who do I like the least, and who do I like the best? And he puts the ones he likes the least first, because if they get killed, he's still got his best ones, that can run and flee and be saved, right? I don't think, some scholars say that he probably wanted to show the best last to his brother, but based on what we've seen in the previous chapter, I don't think that was his motive, was to show those children first and then the ones he loves the most last. I think he was thinking about himself and saving himself. I think he was still nervous about Esau. So almost as soon as he was done wrestling with God, he sees Esau coming, and Jacob put the ones that he loved the most in the rear so they could escape. I'm just sure of it. Doesn't really say that, but I'm just sure of it. This is also a good picture of the dispensation of Christ, where man had a relationship with God, but they didn't really know Him. After Adam, they knew about Him and who He was. And then, of course, God, and that's a picture of the maids with their kids. And then, of course, Leah is a picture of the law or the old covenant, where there was a covenant, but it wasn't really God's best covenant. God's best covenant is with Jesus Christ and the covenant of grace. And that's what we see in Rachel and Joseph. And how much Jacob loved Rachel, and how much Rachel is a picture of the church. Her beauty is a picture of the church. So we see kind of like the three dispensations there. So servants would be no covenant, because really he had the covenant with Leah and Rachel. Leah is the old covenant, and Rachel represents the new covenant. So we can kind of see what's going on here. So then Jacob crossed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. So Jacob did get in front of everybody and put himself first. He didn't just stay behind with Rachel to see what would happen. He jumped out in front of them and heads towards Esau. And as he's going, he would bow and then move forward a little more and bow again. He bowed 7 times, which is the number of completion. There's 7 days in a week. The 8th day is a new week. There's 7 notes in the musical scale. The 8th note is an octave, which is the beginning of a new scale. So you see the number 7 all the time, and it means that it's complete. He paid homage to his older brother. That was his older brother, and he's the younger. And in reality, he really should bow down. He shouldn't expect Esau to bow to him because he's the younger. So Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And this is interesting, because here Jacob had all this fear, and he thought that Esau was still mad at him after 20 years and that he was in trouble. And yet what did God do? God prepares Esau's heart before Jacob even gets there, and Esau is glad to see him. He doesn't even remember what happened. Probably he was so wealthy, had all, you know what? He probably had more than what Isaac had when he met him. So God had caused him to forget and changed his heart, and that's what He does for us. He will. I have Proverbs 16:7 here. It says, "When a man's ways please the Lord, He makes even his enemies to be at peace with him." So Jacob really didn't have anything to worry about. All that fear for nothing. And we tend to do that. We tend to take something and turn it into something bigger than what it really is. When we get some news and we don't know the whole story, we can fill in the blanks with just some terrible stuff. And I'm really good at that. But Jacob did it a lot. So Jacob had a promise from God, and God caused Esau to feel different about Jacob than when he left. Because Esau wanted to kill him. And now Esau's glad to see him, and they cried, and it was very emotional. So Esau also was blessed by God. Excuse me. So verse 5. And he lifted his eyes, Esau, and saw the women and children, and said, "Who are these with you?" So he said, and that's Jacob. So Jacob said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Then the maidservants came near. So the first ones that presented themselves to Esau was the maidservants. Excuse me. I have a tickle in my throat. The maidservants came near, they and their children, and bowed down. And then Leah comes near with her children, and they bowed down. And afterwards, Joseph and Rachel came near, and they bowed down. So the very last was the best. What does the Bible say? The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. So here we see a picture of them presenting themselves to Esau, and they all pay homage. They all bowed down to him. They all respected him and who he was as the elder brother. Verse 8, then Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company which I met?" And he's talking about Jacob had sent ahead of him all of these cattle and sheep, and he sent donkeys and all of these different droves and set them ahead in each individual drove. Like he sent all the donkeys, and then he sent all the sheep to come up a little bit later, so that Esau kept getting hit with present after present after present. And Jacob trying to appease Esau's wrath. So Jacob wanted to find favor in Esau's sight. And that's what he says. These are to find favor in the sight of my Lord. But God had already given him favor. So, that it was nice to be generous with what God had given him, but he had already had that favor. But Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. And I believe that Esau did. If he had 400 men following him around, I believe he did have enough. And Jacob said, no, please. If I found favor in your sight, then receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face, as though I had seen the face of God, and you were pleased with me. Now, what does he mean by that? As though I've seen the face of God. And what he's saying is, you've forgiven me. Just like our God is gracious and forgives us, and you're like seeing God, because you're not holding anything against me. So he said, it's as though I've seen the face of God and you are pleased with me. In other words, you're not mad at me, you're happy to see me, and that's the way God is. You remember the story of the prodigal son, when the father saw him and went running towards him. And you saw here where Esau went running towards him, just like the father and the prodigal son. There had been a change in his heart, and he had actually a love for Jacob. So please take my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. So Jacob's saying, I have plenty, I've been blessed, please take this gift. So he urged him, and he took it. So Jacob urged him, and Esau did take the blessing. Then Esau said, let us take our journey, let's go, and I will go before you. So in other words, Esau says, come on, let's go. We're going to go home, and I'll go in front of you. But Jacob said to him, my Lord, now this is weird, and you're going to see something strange happen here. I don't know that Jacob was totally convinced, but just check this out. My Lord knows that the children are weak, and the flocks and herds which are nursing are with me, and if the men should drive them too hard one day, all the flock will die. So in other words, I have to move slow. Can't push things because it's too hard on the young flocks, it's too hard on the young kids. Please let my Lord go on ahead before his servant, and I will lead slowly at a pace which the livestock that go before me and the children are able to endure until I come to my Lord in Seir. So, and that makes sense, right? I got to move slow because these animals, I don't want to push them too hard. Okay. Sorry, sometimes I have work things that I got to check my notices and stuff. So anyways, this makes sense. I don't want to push everything too hard. You go on ahead. I'll meet you there, right? So what this tells us is Jacob is very self-sufficient, but we should never follow the world. The world should be following us. The world should be looking at us as leaders. And at least here, Jacob is being a leader. And he's saying, no, this is the way I want to do it. I'm not going to follow you. My people, my family needs to follow me, and I'll be the leader. Esau is trying to take the lead here, but Jacob's not going to let him. Jacob's saying, no, I'll do it. Okay? Have you ever had a family member that tries to get you to do something you don't really want to do? Okay, that's what's going on here. So we should never follow the world. We are to lead as God leads us.
And he's putting himself in the role of servant.
Right.
Here he is telling Esau that he is like his older brother's servant.
Right.
That's interesting. It's
Yeah.
very humbling, I think.
Yeah. Well, he's saying all the right words, but
He's still deceived. see that?
Jacob's pretty, oh, watch. Wait till you see what happens
Yeah,
here.
I know the story, but I've never really looked at it like this before.
Yeah. This big on the big screen like this, I know.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But see how he says he's going to, until I come to my Lord and seer? Okay, let's move on. So Esau said, now, let me leave with you some of the people who are with me. But he said, what need is there? Jacob said, why do you need to leave some of your people? I'm good. I have plenty. Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. Now, the world always wants to put an influence on you. If you're not following them, they want to infiltrate. See, Esau wanted to put some of his people in there with Jacob, and for some reason, Jacob didn't want that. And I think rightly so, because you don't want the influence of a whole other camp, which Esau is a picture of the world and kind of doing what he wants. He forsook his birthright for food, and he's a picture of really the world, that the fleshly pleasures. And even in the New Testament, it says that Esau was a person of the flesh. And so we see here a picture of the world, how if you're not following the world, then they're gonna put something in front of you, television show, book, a magazine, something in front of you that's going to influence you. And I just want to share something with you, like what I'm talking about. The world will put an influence on you. Don't accept something that could compromise you or your family. Okay? Say no. I don't want that. I'll have nothing to do with that. If it's a compromise. I want to show you something. And this is like one of my pet compromises that the church has done. And some people will say this doesn't matter, but it matters. I want to show you something. In Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And then verse 2, it says, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And we went over this back in Genesis chapter 1. But there's a Christian theory, and they call it the gap theory, that between verse 1 and 2, could be millions of years. When evolution was being accepted, they said that, and geology was starting to look at things, they said this earth is millions and millions and millions of years old. 4 billion years old is what they believe, that the earth is 4 billion years old. And when science started saying the proof is in the layers of sediment that you see, each layer represents takes millions of years to build a layer of sediment, and then you've got fossils in there, and you've got another layer, maybe from a volcano or something. And so they're saying that took millions and millions of years, and the church tried to go, well, maybe science is right. So they say between verse 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So He did create the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. So they say something happened in between verse 1 and verse 2. And they say it was a pre-Adamic flood. Have you guys ever heard that?
I kind of, yeah.
Have you heard that before? Pastor Davis believes that there was a pre-Adamic flood.
He talked about that years ago.
Yeah, he believes wrong. And I'll tell him. But he's wrong because, and I'm going to show you why. But this is what happens when the church tries to accept something in science and then fit Scripture around it. They start coming up with, well, how does this hurt the gospel? And then maybe there is a gap there. And maybe there is millions and millions of years between verse 1 and verse 2. How does that affect the gap? It explains the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs were on the earth, and then there was a catastrophe, and that's what created all of the fossils and all the things that we see. And so they try to fit it all in between verse 1 and 2. It's called the gap theory. And they say that during this time Satan fell, and whatever was on the earth at the time had to be destroyed. And they call it the pre-Adamic flood. That it was the first flood. And it was before Adam. That there was all of this chaos and all this craziness. However, that's not what Scripture teaches. That's only... Actually, science doesn't teach that. Science only teaches that the earth is 4 billion years old. So they tried to fit it in there. Now, let me just show you something here. The gap view, if you believe in the gap theory, that was millions of years between there, that means that there was animals killing other animals. That means there was death and viciousness and weeds and all kinds of stuff going on the earth, right? And then God destroyed it, killed everything, right? But that goes against theology, because in Romans 5:12 it says, "Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and what? Death." There was no death before Adam. God created the world in 6 days, rested on the seventh, and what did He say after each day? He saw, and it was good. And then at the end, it was very good. There was nothing bad about what He created. What He created was amazing. And death did not come except through Adam's sin. There was no death. It was Adam that brought that death. According to Scripture. That's why you can't believe in the gap theory. And that's what the world tries to do, is sneak something in, and then you compromise, and what happens? Now, it sounds very innocent. What does it matter? It doesn't change the gospel. It doesn't change the fact that I'm saved. But it does change the fact that Adam did something that caused this world to fall. We live in a fallen world. We now have death, decay, fighting, killing, because of what Adam did. Not, God didn't build that. God didn't create that and then destroy it and then create it again, and only to have it happen again. It didn't come till Adam. So death spread to all men because all sinned. And then in 1 Corinthians 15:26, the last enemy that will be destroyed is death. You see, death is an enemy. Death is not the friend of God. In evolution, they say death is the friend of evolution, because through death, evolution creates a new animal, because they die, and then only these live, and that creates something new. And so death is really evolution's friend, but death is the enemy of God. Romans 5:14 says, "Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam until Moses, even over those who had not sinned in the likeness of the offense of Adam, who is a type of him who was to come." Another thing, Adam was a type of Christ who is to come. And it says death reigned from Adam until Moses, and even over those who had not sinned. So Adam is the one who brought death. Verse 17 in Romans 5:17 says, "For if by the transgression of the one, Adam," by the way, Adam was not a word for mankind. It was an individual. "The transgression of the one, death reigned through the one. Much more, those who receive the abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness will reign in life through the one, Jesus Christ." So, the problem in accepting the gap theory is that you reject, they don't even realize that they reject this doctrine of death through Adam. But it is a rejection of that, because they're saying, well, there was death and violence long before Adam in the pre-Adamic world. Am I making sense? All right. Now, I got one more thing to show you, and then we're going to get back into the story, because Jacob's deceiving Esau, and you're going to see this. But I just want to show you how science, we think that they're so smart and we've got all this technology. But I want to show you something. One of the things that science will say is, we know that the earth is at least 4 billion years old, and that the universe is about 15 billion years old, because you wouldn't be able to see that star that's 10 billion light years away unless the Earth was at least 10 billion years old, right? Unless the universe was at least 10 billion years old, because it takes 10, they're using the light year, which is a measure of distance, as a measure of time. What we're seeing is a star 10 billion years ago. We're seeing that star like it was 10 billion years ago. And that's what scientists tell us, right? It has to be that old. We wouldn't be able to see the stars. We wouldn't be able to see something 5 billion years away from us, because it takes 5 billion years to get there. Have you ever heard that? That's what atheists will say every single time. But they do believe in the Big Bang Theory. And I want to show you something. They have the same problem in the Big Bang Theory. The same problem that they say proves that the Earth is at least 4 billion years old is a problem that they have as well. And it's called the horizon problem. And supposedly there was nothing, and then there was a bang, and everything exploded, and everything that we see and the expanding universe came from that explosion, right? And everything evolved into what we see today. But there's a problem. They have the same problem with the Big Bang Theory that we have with the Bible and the speed of light, okay? Because it takes 4 billion years for that star to get here. And that is, if this is the Milky Way, and we're in the Milky Way galaxy, and you look out here, and this is 14 billion light years to this galaxy, right? Okay, if you look to the east, but then you look to the west and you see another galaxy 14 billion light years away. Between them is what? 28 billion light years. Which means the universe is not old enough for this starlight to reach this galaxy, right? So, because the universe is only 15 billion or 20 billion years old. So they have the same problem. Let me show you something. From here to here, if truly the universe is 14 billion years old, or 15 billion, or 20 billion, then this part of space should be a little bit different than this part of space. Because for things to even out, you know how when you have hot water, if you leave it sit, it's going to become the temperature of the room. That's just that's the laws of physics. Laws of physics say that everything tends to equalize. That if you take hot water outside in the cold, it's going to cool down to whatever the temperature is. If you put it in the refrigerator, it cools down to that temperature, right? So, according to the Big Bang, these protons, this region cannot share energy with this region. These protons have never reached here. Therefore, this should be a different temperature than this. And a proton is just really light. You can measure it in a wave or a particle. But anyway, when they went up in 1978 with the satellite to check out the temperature of the universe, and they mapped it, all that they could see, it came back that everything was even. And it shouldn't have been. They expected it to be different here than here because of, they call this the horizon. There's a problem here because there's no way that the light from here has reached to here, because this should be a different temperature than this, because those protons can't get over there. But what they found out was it's all the same. They thought there was something wrong with that probe that they sent out in 78, so they did it again in the late 90s, and they looked at the cosmic microwave background. It was exactly the same as what they had done in 77, 78. Same readings, everything. And it baffles science to this day. They call it the horizon problem. And it's the exact same problem as what the atheists say, well, how's that starlight reach the Earth? And guess what the scientists are saying? They're saying that maybe in the early days of the universe, light didn't travel at the speed it travels at now. Maybe it traveled faster, and that's why this tends to be the same temperature as this. So when a Christian says, well, maybe light didn't travel the same as it does now, and that starlight is hitting the Earth because light traveled faster, they'll laugh at you. They've laughed at me because I've said that. You don't know how fast light traveled back 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago. God stretched out the heavens. Maybe when He stretched it out, that light hit here. But the point that I'm trying to make is they run into the same problem. Scientists can't answer this. They have no answer for it. They have two things that might have happened. Speed of light might be different. And when you say that to an atheist, they'll laugh at you. No, speed of light is constant. E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Speed of light, C stands for constant. Speed of light is always constant. Nothing ever goes faster than the speed of light. So they run into the same problem. And yet they'll say, oh, well, maybe light did move faster years and years and years ago. But if you say that, then you're crazy. But they run into the same problem. So here's what I'm saying. Bible first, science second. And especially when it's just a theory, or we think. But the problem is, they'll say, well, we know that the earth is 4 billion years old because of the geologic structure. Or because of the starlight that took so long to reach the earth. Or because of, and they'll give you reasons that we know it. But they don't know. They're guessing. And now they've got a dilemma because two different probes, 20 years apart, show something anomalous. And I'll tell you one more thing that's cool about this is if it's all even across here, that means everything is centered right here. Everything is relative to us. It almost appears that the Milky Way is the center of the universe. And it is really for us because we can only go so far out to the edge of the galaxy. But according to this cosmic background, it started right here with us. Interesting. And scientists, they have to admit that if they talk about the horizon problem. So, again, hammer home my point. Let's not compromise Scripture because science tells us something that they think is correct. And that's what Jacob was protecting his family by not letting Esau have a way in to his family. He was being very wise. Now, watch what happens here. Okay, so Jacob says, I'll meet you in Seir. And verse 17 says, Jacob journeyed to Succoth. He didn't go to Seir. He went the opposite direction. The exact opposite. As soon as Esau left, he was like, okay guys, we're turning this way. And he went to Succoth, built himself a house. He didn't just put up a tent. He built a house. And he made booths for his livestock. In other words, he put his livestock in tents, but he built him a house, and therefore the name of the place is called Succoth, which means booths, or covering. So, and that was weird, that he made, livestock back then didn't dwell in tents, okay? But for some reason he put his, I don't know what he was doing, trying to hide it or what was going on, but he went the opposite way that he told his brother, and he went to Succoth, and we don't know how long he was there. Obviously he was there for a while, because the next chapter is the story of Jacob's daughter, and she was much older in the next story that's coming up. So here Jacob built a house and he settled. Completely told his brother, I'll be there, hang tight, and then went the opposite direction and settled in Succoth. Now, I don't know, the Bible doesn't tell us how long he was there. It's only telling us that he went the opposite direction. So again, he deceives Esau, tells him one thing and does another. It says, then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem. So sometime later, after he built his house or whatever, he decided to come back towards where he was supposed to. I don't know what he was doing. If he was taking a year off or feeding the cattle or what he was doing out there, but he was there for a while. And then the very next verse says, then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, which is where God told him to go to the land of Canaan. When he came from Padam Aram, and he pitched his tent before the city. So he gets to Shechem and puts his tent up right outside the city, and he goes in and buys some land. So here he's going to stick around, obviously, because he buys a parcel of land where he had pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And then he erected an altar, and there called it El Elohi Israel. So now, Jacob leaves Succoth, goes to Shechem, and there he builds an altar. El Elohi Israel means the mighty God of Israel. So he finally builds an altar to the Lord and settles in Shechem. So we end. It's okay. We end chapter 33 with Jacob settling in Canaan in the land of Shechem, and but I wanted you to see that even though Esau wanted to help him, wanted to lead him, wanted to leave some people there, Jacob kind of went and did his own thing. Now, why? We don't know. The Bible doesn't shed any light on it. But eventually he did come to Canaan, and eventually him and his brother did get along. They both buried Isaac. But here you see a picture of Jacob not allowing any outside influence, even with his brother, into his family. And we need to do the same thing. We need to not allow the world to affect us. We need to affect the world. We don't need to let them try to change Scripture to fit whatever they say. Try to change, and they do it all the time. Well, with letting homosexuals be pastors and allowing that and not. I need to be careful with what I say here, because those people are the image of God. God created us in His image. We all bear His image, but we fall short. That's why we need Christ. So we need to love everybody, but we don't need to allow their influence in our belief system to the point where we pervert the gospel into something that it's not. God said He created the heavens and the earth, and He did it in 6 days. And then they have another theory called the day-age theory. Well, each day represents millions of years. The first day is, a million years. The second day is another million. But that's crazy too, because in Exodus, God said, you'll rest on the Sabbath day. Why? Because I created everything in 6 days, and I rested on the seventh. Therefore, I want you to rest the seventh day. It's not an epic. It's one day. And God specifically told us it was days when He gave the 10 Commandments to Moses. So, we cannot let the outside world influence our beliefs. We need to let our beliefs influence the world, and we need to stand firm with them. Right?
Question, just curiosity.
Yes.
How far was the brothers? Okay, since he took off and didn't go to see her, how far were they apart in the land?
You know what? I'm not sure, but far enough apart to where they wouldn't see each other unless they took a long journey. Quite a ways, but I'm not sure exactly how far. You can look that up, though. Let us know.
The fact that he built a house, that basically tells you that he was
going to be there for a while.
Staying there for a while.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't need a house.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think that as detailed as the Bible is, that if there were so many millions of years or something like that would happen, God would have put it in there
Right.
for us to discover? It would have been revealed.
Yeah.
But created means generally from nothing.
Yeah.
And so He created, and then there was nothing.
Right.
He would have said it if it was.
I agree with that, 100%. You know why that gap theory got so popular? Because it's in Dake's Bible. It's in the Schofield Reference Bible. It got very popular when science said, this is a fact. And it's not a fact. They're guessing. It is not a fact. It's a theory. They weren't. If you didn't observe it, see it, then they don't know for a fact. They think based on what they see. Look at these layers. This took millions of years to happen. Well, when you first saw Adam, when he was a day old, he probably looked around 30, right? 28. He was fully grown. He wasn't a baby. And you would say, oh, that man is probably around 28, 30 years old. But he's not. He's only a day old. And we say that that's what they do with the universe. That's what they do with the earth. They don't understand the power of God until they see that cosmic background. And then they go, how can this be? How is this possible? That it's a problem for them. You don't hear them talk about it, do you? But it's a problem. So whenever somebody says that about starlight, just say, well, what about the horizon problem? If they're scientists, they'll know what it is. Oh, well, that's different. See?
Yeah, that was always there. But it's the same if you say between chapter 1 and 2. And I think if God wanted us to know something happened something between 1 and 2, He would put it in there, right?
Right. You would think so.
I mean, if He wanted us to know that
Yeah.
part, so.
So, but anyway, I hope you enjoyed that.